I talk to you about, of course, today is big data. I'll do the overview before turning it off to the more than capable hands of Santosh Rao, who will take you through most of the analytics with a special guest appearance by A.V. Mendez, and then your Q&A where you get to be the special guests. So what we're looking at here is a proliferation of digital data and a changing mix from predominantly structured to either unstructured or something in between, which we like to call semi-structured data. We can tell at this point this is a secular trend. It's been identified both by the buy and sell side, by enterprises large and small, and increasingly comes to define the data space. And it's increasingly come to be both the next big thing, which ironically it's been for a while, but we think this is now the time where the next big thing part comes true. So big data is a broad term. I've certainly heard it used for many different usages, as you probably have too, not only for large multi-structured data sets, but also data coming from new technologies and new technologies in databases, which are increasingly required to capture, store, or analyze more and more data in more and more complicated and less structured form. The traditional database architectures aren't really equipped for this, so big data is the next step, long prophesied and now arriving. Elements of big data are not new, of course. They've been in practice for many years in certain areas, certain business segments, but they've been really reshaping and becoming more and more broad. So they went from being a peripheral consideration in logistics, some types of government planning, retail, financial services, to a core business application and a core source of business intelligence really across the Web 2.0 ecosystem and going forward. Winners in this space are going to be specialized vendors that enable the holistic adoption of big data solutions. Because of the proliferation of data, because of the proliferation of semi and unstructured data, new approaches, new databases, and new analytics are called for. They are now emerging to great attention with huge potential and increasingly real accretive value. For the rest of this deep dive, I'm going to turn you over first to Santosh Rao, our head of research. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Mac. This is Santosh Rao. Any discussion on big data has to start off with the evolution of data, the transformation of data, which I believe underpins the whole big data movement. So historically, most accessible data to date has been in the traditional relational databases. This was pioneered by IBM and Oracle, and this was accessed and managed with certain tools and infrastructure and reported with the BI, business intelligence software. So this was the traditional way of doing things. But things changed in the last 5 to 10 years. There's been a proliferation of social networks, real-time consumer behavior, mobility sensor networks, and others have totally overwhelmed the current IT infrastructure. I mean, to put it in perspective, roughly 77% of all enterprise data by 2015 will be unstructured versus 36% in 2010. 90% of data today was created in the last 2 years. And the volume of data doubles every 18 months. And these are stats that are out there that everyone knows. And 95% of data today that's coming out of enterprises is unstructured. So this is significant new order, and it demands new thinking, new tools, new strategies to take advantage of it, to stay competitive. So where is this data coming from? I have a whole exhibit here. You see a mobile phone, sensors, videos, machine logs, e-commerce, everything that the new tools and avenues to communicate. Just to put more numbers behind them, there are 4 billion mobile phones right now in the world. In terms of sensors, 30 billion RFID tags produced globally within the last 2 years. These are huge numbers. In the social media, Twitter generates more than 7 terabytes of data every day. Facebook generates 10 terabytes. So these are huge numbers that need to be processed, analyzed, and the current infrastructure is not able to do that. It's not capable of doing that. So moving on to the next slide, which is how big is big data? Now this is a simple chart. IDC has drawn the baseline. They're saying it grew from 3.2 billion in 2010 and expected to reach roughly 17 billion by 2015 at a 40% compounded growth rate. This chart is simple, but it is significant for 2 reasons. These days, everybody's jumping on the big data bandwagon. every project seems to be big data. So there's no real line drawn between what is big data and what's the old way of doing things. So I think IDC has done a good job of kind of drawing the baseline, saying that, okay, these are incremental big data projects besides the old BI projects. So it's a good baseline number to go with. Moving on to the next chart, this is the big data landscape as we see it. There are more nuances than what we have in here, but I think at a very core level, this is what I believe is the landscape. You have the structured and unstructured data. You have the traditional way of the CRMs, the ERP, and SCMs coming in. And then you have the old platform players like the IBM, Oracle. But now with this new data, with the unstructured data also, you have this niche specialized players who are specialized in the analytics of it, beyond what the traditional BI vendors offered. So you have the Palantirs, the MuSigmas, the Operas, the Splunk, and some Sumo Logic, and a whole bunch of private names that we'll go into it in a little more detail later on. But to kind of just classify it, you have the infrastructure players, which the traditional guys, plus the new ones coming on, and then you have the analytics players that are specialized and taking good market share away from the traditional players. So what's the technology underlying this? The open source software frameworks have become very popular for big data because they're focused on this. They have good distribution systems, and Hadoop has almost become synonymous with big data, even though there are other ones out there. Hadoop is the leader. It adds large-scale storage mechanism. It's a multi-structured database, and it has a good ecosystem around it, plus it's free. So it's been adopted by companies like Cloudera and others, and Oracle and IBM have also slowly begun to adopt that into their system. So it's getting good momentum behind it. Then you have the other ones, the Mongos, the Cassandra. Then you have the proprietary ones sold by all the vendors, the SAPs, IBM, and then you have Splunk. And plus also you have the in-house systems out there that do big data as well. So there's a whole bunch of technologies behind them, but given the cost, the cheap nature of the open source software, I think open source has a good chance of being adopted much faster. Just going on to the next slide, looking at the prominent players in the space, we kind of separated it out. You know the public names as well, very well. You have the IBMs and the TIBCO, Microsoft, Google. On the private side, I have a whole list later on, but you have Cloudera is a big 10gen, Palantir, Hortonworks, 1010, and AB will touch on these things a little later on. So the whole landscape is it's getting wide. The big players are coming in. They're taking up the small players. They're filling in the niches that they need to. I mean, they're big in the relational database side, so they need to get into the unstructured data. So there's been a lot of M&A activity in the space, and there's a whole, and every big company pretty much has bought nice analytic companies into their fold to kind of increase their product suite. So just going on to the next slide, the promise and challenges of this whole big data movement. The biggest promise is the predictive analytics, and that's the best part of big data. It improves operational efficiency, security, and provides new revenue opportunities. To get more specific, big data has applications across verticals. In terms of retail, they've been using it to graph social networks, to identify influencers. In the utilities, logistic, transportation side, they're using machine data to refine their marginal costs and add revenue streams. And in the financial services and security side, they're using big data for fraud detection stuff. So, I mean, it has big applications, big uses, and big revenue implications for companies. And ultimately, we believe there will be massive adoption of big data given the low storage, hardware, and software components. So the cost factor is definitely going to play into the adoption of big data. On the challenge side, you have the technology is still in the early stage. It needs to be tested. There are some security issues. So it's not totally enterprise ready as yet. So the parts of it are, so that they're being there's some hybrid models out there using open source and proprietary ones. And also, big data analytics has become so complicated, so complex that there is a shortage of tools and engineers to actually make sense of this whole thing. So the only limiting factors are really the tools that are available and the engineering talent around it. So once that comes into place, I think that'll take off again. So on the next slide, I have I'm going to hand it over at this point to AB, who's just going to go over the winners and losers in the space, and then I'll just come back later on.
Thank you, Santosh. This is probably a little bit of an oversimplification, this slide, but first I'll just introduce myself. I'm AB Mendez. I'm an analyst with Greencrest. I'm a director in the PE source group at Knight Capital, which is a joint effort between Greencrest and Knight. I actually spent several years, I was a data warehouse architect and a consultant before beginning my career as an equities analyst. So spent a lot of time in the relational database space and extracting, transforming, and loading large volumes of data out of operational databases and into analytical dimensional design data warehouses. So I'm certainly fascinated with the emergence of big data and seeing how unstructured and semi-structured or polymorphic data is being used in addition to structured data to help companies process large flows of data in real time and ultimately make better decisions, and in many cases make predictive models that can help them to gain an edge on their competition. Being that I come from the data warehousing background, I still maintain contact with a lot of people who are a lot smarter than I am that are in that space, and so benefit from hearing kind of what some of the trends are, on the street around big data and the actual practitioners in this space. One takeaway that I've gotten from some of these conversations is that it really is early days, and that this trend, big data, it'll take probably some time before we see the anywhere near the full impact. One reason just being that enterprise IT departments are slow moving, and two, initially many departments are going to see this as more of a cost saver and risk mitigation tool that is more extremely relevant for some industries, less likely to generate incremental revenue in other areas. There are certain industries where it's real, it's already being adopted at scale, and I think the first ones that come to mind are financial exchanges, ad exchanges, or real-time bidding, where transactions have to happen in microseconds. Cloud computing and social media. Santosh mentioned Twitter, and there's some overlap between social media and financial, trading. There are certainly funds and quant funds that are using the entire fire hose data from Twitter and applying sentiment analysis, which is unavoidably based on big data analytical frameworks across Twitter and other social media sites, and combining that with what hard financial data they have and price indications. And then fourth, e-commerce. I think Amazon does appear on my list of winners and losers just because I'm beginning to grasp some of the vision of where this company is headed. I've scratched my head on the valuation, as many other investors have for years, but I kind of see them becoming potentially sort of a Google, or sort of the operating system for commerce, and not necessarily being tied to just selling physical goods over the longer term. We can talk about that more offline. But so those are the four industries I see most impacted immediately. So outside of those industries, maybe slower uptake of big data. That said, regardless of the rate of uptake across different industries, what we're talking about is nothing less than a quantum leap in what can be accomplished by enterprises and governments using the combination of the latest generation of hardware and software. And the way we think about that is kind of big data software or database frameworks, and then on kind of the hardware side, in-memory processing technologies where kind of the software and the data meets the hardware, as well as having seen a presentation earlier this week from a private company in the networking space called Plexi. So kind of the future next generation of networking technologies based on fiber optic connectivity and kind of a flatter network structure, more of a ring structure with one controller rather than a more Cisco type of hierarchical structure. So the combination of those three areas really does provide the potential for just exponential growth in the quantity of volume, the quantity of data that can be processed in real time, and also overlaid with historical data and the kinds of things that makes possible. Just a couple of kind of data points, talking to a couple of different CEOs of in-memory database processing companies who will actually be joining us in Knight's offices 2 weeks from now. One of them was saying, I'm not really interested in talking to a CTO who is looking for a 2x increase in the bandwidth or the quantity of data, the speed with which he can process large amounts of data. I want to talk to somebody who can actually envision what they might do with a 100x increase in the speed and the quantity of data that they can process in real time, because it really is kind of a sort of a quantum leap. Santosh and I attended an SAP event this morning where HANA was discussed and SAP's approach to real-time processing of large data sets, especially as relates to financial services. And I have heard some people in industry say positive things about SAP and HANA, notwithstanding what some view as sort of an exorbitant cost, which represents a great opportunity for some private upstarts in that space. But one thing that he said was, imagine if it didn't take you a few hours to commute between New York and California, but if you could go from New York to California in 5 minutes, how would that change your life? You might wake up in the morning and commute to California for work, and then commute back to New York where you live. And that is sort of just a good way to sort of visualize the paradigm shift, the kinds of things that are being made possible in enterprise computing that were sort of unthinkable historically. And to put it in a little bit more tangible context, a friend that I spoke with at a professional services company that is focused on cloud computing, big partner of Salesforce.com, mentioned to me months ago that, log files are one example of unstructured data that big data applications process very effectively. So, for example, the Air France flight 447 that crashed, I guess I think it was 2009, all 216 passengers were lost. Airplanes are constantly transmitting their log file data back to the Earth via satellite, however they do it. Honestly, I don't know. But if that kind of data could be processed more effectively in real time, it's entirely possible that some, if not all, of those passengers could have been located while they were still alive, because the data existed. There wasn't an effective means for processing it and responding to it. During the crash, before the crash, whatever the sort of quantitative signals were that were being given that something was wrong. Moving back to the slide, just to quickly go over what I've listed as some of the potential winners and losers. I just want to kind of paint the picture from a 10,000-foot view. We think of big data, the landscape being comprised of the platform companies, what I think of as the clouderas and the 10gens that are something like a private company equivalent of which you have a Red Hat in the Linux world, somebody who can help an enterprise to become entirely prepared for transitioning to this big data processing paradigm. So those kind of platform companies, the tools companies like a Splunk that is mainly used for security, but their clients are beginning to see that there are a lot of other applications of the Splunk technology, a search-based technology that came from the MapReduce function and Facebook and Google's innovations in database processing. Splunk Live, by the way, on December 12th in New York, for those who are here and might be interested in attending. And then the platform companies that are not open source, that are more, think maybe like the Oracle of big data, something like a Palantir. And then apart from that, we kind of, again, where the hardware meets the software, we talk about in-memory database processing and fiber optic networks, sort of the next generation private companies that are helping to facilitate this quantum leap forward. Those are the winners, right? The private companies that are doing something truly new and innovative, that's at PE Source and at Greencrest, those are the kinds of companies that we spend our time identifying, working with, and in some cases introducing to investors. The public companies we look at, Workday, Amazon, Splunk, Teradata, Salesforce.com, Informatica are some of the ones that I'm pointing out. Oracle and SAP, interestingly, I'm not listing either the winner or loser category just because each of these companies stands to gain in some areas and lose in other areas. Again, topics that we could discuss offline if that's an area of interest. And lastly, I'm going to leave you with something that someone that I spoke with in industry mentioned. He is working on preparation for a large Workday implementation of a very large client who is moving off of Oracle Financials and onto Workday. I think more often you're seeing these cloud companies coming in alongside the well-entrenched players in the database and application space. This is just one example, just one data point. Nonetheless, I think it's meaningful. And his description of Workday led me to Workday blog, where their CTO says, we've made the object model the core of our architecture, and here's why it matters. Instead of the thousands of relational tables and millions of lines of code used to define traditional enterprise software, Workday applications consist of millions of metadata definitions. So this is sort of one of another way to describe big data. We're transitioning from silos to integration across customer CRM, ERP, financials, HR, all that data now can play in one space, and you can recognize trends that previously were invisible. So I think Workday is one company that is sort of emblematic of that transition. Back to Santosh. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, A.B. Just kind of going over some of the names, picking up on where A.B. He mentioned some of the names. I'm going to go over some of the private names that we were able to research on, and so I have a whole list here, and then a deep dive into 3 of the companies after that. Cloudera, A.B. mentioned, is it's one of the prominent players in the private space. It has about 76 million in funding, founded in 2008. This is a company that found some traction because it's an enterprise distribution platform for structured and unstructured data using the Hadoop framework. So because of that, I think they have a good dedicated support, and they have really pushed. Hadoop has gained traction, and they are just riding that on, and in fact driving it to some extent. They have a good client list, as you see on the next page. So Hadoop is the big data processing framework that is most known. So I think that should help Cloudera. But most important of all, they have an exclusive partnership agreement with Oracle. So I think that has been very helpful for Cloudera. So we should be hearing a lot about them down the road. And also we have 1010 Data that I also list later on. That was founded in 2000. It has about 35 million in funding. That again has a full diversified vertical customer base. It's very pretty much playing on the big data. This is a play on the cloud in big data. So it's a cloud-based platform for hosting big data, and provides simplified analytics platform that non-technical users can utilize. Then there's another one, 10Gen, which A.B. mentioned as well. We found this very interesting, and we've been looking at it a little more deeply. This is almost the Red Hat of the big data world. Has a nice client base, Disney, Cisco, Forbes, and it uses the MongoDB platform that's also complementary to Hadoop and all the other platforms out there. And so that's doing well. And besides that, you have a whole bunch of other companies that are emerging, still early in their growth cycle, evolution, but they are getting out there, and they will catch the attention as the technology and the whole platform improves. Going at this point, I think what we're going to do is do the concluding remarks at this point, and I'll hand it over to Max, and then we'll come back again for Q&A.
Certainly a lot of information. Thank you, Santosh. Maybe as a way to structure and begin to clarify your thoughts, and again, thank you. We see quite a big data cascade of questions coming in from you, and we look forward to doing our best to process that. I might leave you with a few thought points by way of summary, and also to inspire our further conversation here at Greencrest with you on these issues ahead of next week's release of the report, of which a very small abridged part was reviewed in our discussion today. So let's remember that big data is still in the early stages of its adaptation and its evolution. We expect much further penetration of the enterprise space, with really enhanced revenue opportunities coming in the future. We should remember, though, that this isn't just disrupting the staid relational database space, that big data players continue to disrupt each other. This is an area of rapid evolution where the future dominant technologies have not fully formed, making it an important place to stay informed as it forms into the trends that will be discernible and rideable from both a revenue and an enterprise development framework moving forward. The enhanced analytics are the core promise of the big data movement. Emerging vendors, Splunk, which you've heard something about today on several occasions, are very disruptive to some of the established players. So they may be a threat to existing business intelligence vendors, but they are now still a sort of and as opposed to an instead for many large enterprises. We expect that as big data continues its exciting, its fast-paced, and its non-linear evolution, it will have fits and starts where it takes major steps into basic utilization, and we feel like we're on the cusp of what is an inflection point for an industry that's long promised and now delivering. Traditional business intelligence vendors will either innovate and incorporate some or all of the special utility and the special enhancement that big data offers, or we will probably continue to see, alongside that strategy, significant M&A activity in which acquisition of the new innovation, either to bundle into existing platforms, to add on to the service suite, or to replace. We think those days are not as far away as some would say. Replace older and increasingly dated technologies will define the space during this period of disruptive evolution that's exciting and very much still ongoing. As the technology side of the equation is rapidly being addressed, we expect the next several years to see massive innovation and progress in the big data field. Another way to say this is, as this movement, and we really do see it as a movement, as this movement evolves, it will create disruptions to its own earlier incarnations and to pre-existing capabilities. But what is worthy of keeping in mind is for a growing number, particularly in the consumer space, but a growing number of Web 2.0 companies, the data, the unstructured, the big data that they're generating may become the core value proposition for these firms as against the services and utilities they once offered to attract the huge crowds that are now producing both machine and individual batches of unstructured data many, many times larger than we thought they would be producing just 12 to 18 months ago. So we look forward to continuing to assist you one-on-one and through our published work, forthcoming next week, in making sense of what we think is a definitive, exciting, evolving new set of opportunities in the private as well as public, but really the private company space. Thank you for your time today. We're excited to take as many of the big data load of questions that you have for us as we can, and we look forward to serving you and discussing your needs with you going forward here at Greencrest Research.
Thanks, Max. Right now we'll take about a minute. We'll just tally up the questions. There's still time. We have a good number, but let's get yours in, and we'll get back in 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, guys, thank you. So we'll start with the first question. How do you see M&A playing out? Will specialized companies remain as standalones, or will they be rolled up into the larger, the behemoths in the space?
Yeah, I can take that. This is Santosh. I think M&A activity was very big last year. 2010, 2011, we saw all the big players, established players. EMC bought Greenplum, IBM bought Netezza, HP bought Vertica, and to name a few, Teradata bought Astrodata. So all the niche companies that were doing very well have been gobbled up by the established players. So now I think there has been a pause for now, but I expect this to pick up as the private companies gain more traction and develop more, get deeper and more robust applications and technology. So I expect them to pick up, M&A activity to pick up, and there are always holes to pick. This is such a big space. There's always holes to pick in to fix in the product suite, and all the privates are targets, I would say.
Great, thank you. I guess this one will go to AB. Can you just clarify the definitions between structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data?
Sure, and this may be an imperfect definition, but structured data is just traditional tabular row and column data that, historically databases were relational databases. You have a kind of entity relationship design where there's a primary key and one or more foreign keys in every table. And there's just very, very straightforward structure of rows and columns of data. Every row has the same columns or the same fields. So every order that you process at Kmart is going to have the dollar price, the number of items in the basket, and so forth. That's structured data. Unstructured data, the most obvious examples are log file data and clickstream data. Some devices create unstructured data when you see which person is connecting to which website from which device at what time. Most of that data is transferred via log files, and when there's an error in an application, that is also transferred through a log. And these are just long files that don't have traditional row and column structure. It's just whatever the machine is spitting out. So machine data that is produced by machines, components of a network, or from application to an application, from an application to a piece of hardware, metadata, broadly speaking, but not as structured. And then semi-structured or polymorphic data. I guess documents are one example of this. Some documents are completely unstructured. Some documents that can be transferred via XML protocol, for example, would be semi-structured. XML does have a structure or a framework for transmitting data, but it's not as consistent or as straightforward as a table that shows you all your customers in a given region or all the transactions on a given day.
Great, thank you. Here's one I think would be good for Max. Which industries have been the most eager adopters? Who have been the laggards?
Okay, so it's a great question. Hard to answer with the time constraint in any kind of full way, but maybe the flyover is the best way to handle this. So one way to think about it is the old days of more structured data were the days in which the actual enterprises themselves were putting the data into databases to use them. The modern world is a world in which machines are generating the data in an unstructured or semi-structured manner, and the general public is generating vast quantities of data that are only collectible and storable now because of the incredible decline in the cost of collecting and storing data, as against what we saw even a few years ago, where the meteoric rise of ever cheaper, ever larger storage facilities with less expensive ways to access data has transformed this. What are the industries that are adopting? The ones that are born in the big data era are certainly ahead of the curve as against those that are trying to move in. So mobile, social, everything mobile and everything social is throwing off vast quantities of big data, which in many cases the augmenter to what is otherwise a freemium business model. So that's certainly been a big area. In terms of business silos or verticals, you see a lot of interest in adaptation here in the logistics space, in the security space, particularly online security, e-commerce, finance, and increasingly retail, both brick and mortar and also click retail. So those would be the sort of early pioneer traditional verticals, but everything born mobile, everything born social is a few steps ahead of its competitors here, as in so many other areas of the Web 2.0 ecosystem.
Great, thanks, Max. Here's another one we have. Let me see 1 second. How do you think the evolution of big data will affect the CRM space?
This is AB. I'll take that. So I wouldn't really. I think the way it'll affect CRM or customer relationship management is the same way it'll affect ERP and just broadly business applications in general. That's why the way I described losers on my winners and losers slide was just the application side of Oracle or any non-cloud software company. Any software that you have to install on your machine, on your laptop, on your desktop, or on a server is kind of going the way of the dodo bird, and just people don't need to do it, don't want to do it. It creates unnecessary overhead on machines and on the network. And so, again, cloud computing, the example in CRM is the company with the ticker CRM, Salesforce.com, Workday in broader business applications, Amazon kind of providing the backbone for small businesses and increasingly for large businesses as well to upload applications into the cloud. I mean, the impact is sort of making business software more efficient for businesses who use it. People don't want to pay up front. The example I gave earlier where a large customer of a given company was paying to implement Workday in the place of Oracle Financials was they were 27 upgrades behind on their Oracle Financials. And so the way upgrades are implemented in cloud-based software, Workday or Salesforce.com, for example, is they're rolled out overnight, and when you log in tomorrow, you see the upgraded version. So it's kind of transparent, and the same is true of Facebook. Facebook is constantly rolling out new features. If something doesn't work in a Facebook or a Salesforce.com or a Workday environment, if there's a problem, guess what? The company just rolls back the software to the previous version, and you have the same data that you had before in the same format. So it just makes business software more invisible to businesses and lets the business customers focus more on growing their business. It makes the economy more efficient, and it's disruptive to an SAP, an Oracle, or a Microsoft that has applications that are not cloud-based. That said, all of those companies have their own cloud migration strategies.
Which could be M&A, right? Okay, so we have a technical question here for Santosh. Is Hadoop framework disruptive to existing BI business intelligence tools?
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that. I don't think so. My first answer is it is not. It is more a complementary framework. The BI infrastructure and software tools that were there are pretty robust, but they're not far enough. They don't go far enough. So what companies are doing, and we heard that this morning from SAP, they're using pieces of Hadoop, especially their distributed file system, which they're known for. They're absorbing that into their system. So it's kind of a hybrid approach so they're kind of complementary. Even Oracle is beginning to use that. IBM is beginning to use Hadoop. So it's at this point, they are not disruptive. They are actually complementary. And in fact, Splunk is right now, just to give you an example, it's a proprietary, it competes with Hadoop to some extent, but also they are complementary to a large extent. So down the road, Splunk, if Hadoop catches on, it could disrupt Splunk, especially because Hadoop is much cheaper, but Hadoop still has a long way to go in terms of getting it enterprise ready. They're not ready yet. They need security issues and consistency issues out there that need to be worked out. So down the road, I can see Hadoop posing a threat, but at this point, they are very complementary to existing BI infrastructure. So.
Great. Well, we have a number more questions, but we're running down on time. So let me just go through it. Let me just pause for one quick moment to roll it up and see if we have time for one more. Thank you. Okay, guys, sorry for that. One last question, and we will wrap this up. What has surprised big data players? What are the positives? What are the negatives?
This is AB. I'll just give an anecdotal example. So I've been following Splunk for some time. Attended their New York Splunk Live event last year, and plan on attending again this year. And I guess their example would just be, this is a technology that has its heritage in search-based technology. They're applying it to security applications that help enterprises to early on detect and counteract advanced persistent threats, for example, in the security world. And I think what they would say they found most surprising is just once enterprise IT professionals get their hands on a technology like this that is as flexible as something like a Splunk is, or many of these other no SQL-based technologies that allow users to combine heterogeneous data from many different sources, the very skilled IT professionals who use this stuff will end up finding many, many different applications outside of the original vertical. So for Splunk, the example is beyond security, a lot of the users in enterprise are finding many, many and varied different use cases. And so I think the same is true of many of the different software and database technologies in the big data space.
Great, thank you. And I guess now we'll ask for Santosh to wrap it up.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. We want to thank you for joining us. Just before I end, just want to let you know a little bit about Greencrest Capital. We provide robust independent research on private companies. We publish sector reports, pre-S1 reports, initiations on emerging companies, private companies. So we look forward to having a conversation with you on our research products and services in the future. With that, once again, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more events such as these in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, our website right there, www.greencrestcapital.com, where there will be more information. Thank you.